Welcome to CRE Unplugged. I'm your host, Ryan Elazari. Today's guest sits at the most important intersections. It's a place where early stage technology meets the largest organized real estate market in the world. Ashley Stinton is the managing partner of NAR REACH, the scale up program operated by Second Century Ventures, the strategic investment arm of the National Association of Realtors. She is the person responsible for identifying which PropTech companies are ready to scale across the housing market and connecting them with the realtor community that can actually get them there. Before she ever set foot into real estate, Ashley was building her career at Coca-Cola and 3M, learning how iconic brands scale, compete, and stay relevant at the top of their industries. Today, we'll be talking about what brokerages actually want from technology, why so many prop tech companies die after demo, and where robotics are headed and the next wave of real estate innovation looks like before the rest of the industry sees it coming. If you want to understand where real estate technology is going over the next 5 years, this is the episode you want to hear. Let's get to it. Ashley, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
So you're based in Chicago, correct?
Yes. Yep.
All right. Yeah. So I'm a New Yorker, so I have to ask you this question: Are thin crust or deep dish, or does it really not matter?
All pizza is good pizza in my book. I love a good New York slice. Deep dish is a bit of a gut bomb, so that's like a one or two times a year type of situation. But all pizza is good pizza to me.
I think that's a fair answer. I kind of feel the same way because I actually, I grew up eating thin
Yeah.
New York pizza like my whole life. That's all I like really knew. And then when I got older, I started getting more into deep dish, and actually some really good deep dish places in New York, like
Okay.
Emmett's. So yeah,
I don't
I
think I've
kind
ever had
of,
Emmett's. We actually have quite a bit of New York pizza coming our way. We've got Prince Street now and a couple others, but Tavern style is actually, I think, the OG pizza for Chicago. Everybody thinks deep dish, but it's actually like a really crispy tavern cut into squares is like the real Chicago pizza.
really, I've never had
Yeah,
that. I got to check
it's
that
really good.
out.
Next time you're in town. Yeah.
All right, yeah, for sure. How do you, I was listening to something the other day, and I kind of agree with their point. They were saying like Domino's, like, is that just like something that would be blasphemy if someone was
Yes.
like, let's order that?
Yeah. I mean, we've got them all over the place. Love their pizza tracker, cute concept. But
Right.
yeah, I'm sticking with like Lou Malnati's or some of the local tavern style shops is the good stuff. The suburbs have a lot more of the chains. You've got the Pizza Huts and the Domino's, but yeah.
Yeah, the other day I was like craving pizza and ended up getting Domino's at like 10 o'clock is the only thing open. But you know what? You end up
Yeah.
eating, it's good, right? But it's not the
Right.
same as local pizza that you want to have.
Sure. Fair enough.
Uh, one other thing that I'm like curious about. You and I go to a lot of conferences and meet with a lot of founders, a lot of
Yeah.
investors. It's like so many different range of people. How do you keep track of everybody? Is there like a secret do you have?
I wish I had a secret. I would love all of the advice and all of the tips because it feels pretty numbing. I'm headed to a conference next week and the week after that. I mean, we actually have a couple solutions in our portfolio. I don't want to be name dropping them, but digital business cards, that has been a more efficient way to do it. And one of them organizes them into what they call pockets. It's almost like a digital Rolodex. I'm aging myself the fact that like I'm calling, something a Rolodex, but it is a way to organize all those people you meet. So that's what I use primarily to remember. And then I'm a big note taker. I love a good pen and paper, note while I'm having a conversation with somebody that I can recall and hit them up afterwards.
It's really a lost art because I
Yeah,
teach a real estate class and everybody's on their laptops. And I remember I
yeah,
was always a notebook and pencil person.
yes, yeah. That's me.
All right, great. Well, I'm so excited to have you here. And I love that your path into real estate came through consumer goods and not through the traditional route that people in real estate come through. So, walk me through a moment when you realized that your skills were built in the world were actually a competitive advantage in the space.
Yeah, it's not something that I thought was going to be a natural transition. It absolutely wasn't linear, but it's been pretty eye-opening how many parallels between the worlds. When I started in consumer goods, it was in the construction and home improvement markets. So I was working with products for home maintenance, renovation, construction, development. So in still that, that universe, but primarily working with different stakeholders. It was either retailers like Sherwin-Williams, the Home Depots of that space, or the actual what we called the end users, which were painters, contractors, electricians, plumbers, etc., or the consumers, your DIYers, your weekend warriors. So everything was related to the home and how somebody, cares for a home, constructs a home, preps a home. Um, so honestly, a lot of that knowledge, there are some parallels to this space. Wasn't working directly with realtors at the time, but certainly a lot of parallels just in terms of a lot of the technology that we have actually does serve some of those same stakeholders. We've got, technology for appraisers, for pre-sale renovation, for interior design, for home warranty, home resilience. So I think that deep knowledge in maintaining a home actually served me well for kind of different product vertical, obviously technology, um, but that was one parallel. The other is those organizations are both deeply rooted in innovation, right? That is core, that is central to their mission. 3M had a 15% rule. So, the idea was encourage all employees to spend that time ideating, collaborating. No idea is a bad idea. And that did give me a lens into all the operations, R&D. I'd go to job sites and challenge contractors that I could mask a window faster than them. And I actually beat them a lot.
Wow.
So yeah, so I think that just idea of being curious, constantly kind of challenging the status quo, and that no part of an organization is off limits given your function, because that's how those organizations stay at the top, is they really encourage everybody to work together. At Coca-Cola, they actually had an innovation lab where they would invite customers, team members in to give them a preview of their innovation pipeline, which created even more opportunities to invite your customers into that. And in a lot of ways, I feel like Reach is that for our industry. We're the innovation pipeline, but we've created this environment where we're inviting the customers of the technology, the end users, to be part of that process, to collaborate, to iterate, to poke holes, to tell us what's not working, because that is the startup journey. You don't build it perfectly, day one. So got experience there. Now, of course, the backing of those companies created a bit more of a safety net than an early stage technology company has. But I feel really well equipped to support that startup journey, to support those founders on that journey of iteration and the pivots required, but also selling it at an enterprise level. There's a lot of legacy in real estate. And I was typically working with enterprise level accounts in consumer goods. So helping guide our technologies on how to sell into those enterprise level businesses in real estate.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought up about selling on enterprise level, because when you first stepped into NAR Reach, I would love to know, like, what were the common mistakes you saw a lot of these founders were making when they were trying to sell into the real estate industry?
Yeah, I think the two biggest ones that we still see today is when selling it at an enterprise level, assuming the top-down approach just makes it happen. If you can just get one major account, if you can just sell, name a franchise, a big franchise brand in this business, if you can just, go from the top, then it will just naturally, be used in every single transaction. And that's not how real estate works. And that's not how franchises, typically operate. It's a strategy of, sure, having buy-in, at the enterprise level often, but still a very ground up working with the brokers and agents in their local markets is really important too. It'd be a lot easier if you could just wave that magic spell at the enterprise level. The other mistake is usually the one size fits all. I build it one way and it will just work for every broker, every agent's business. And there's so many nuances, so many, whether it's production, whether it's, geographic, there's just so many differences in any given broker agent's business. Um, That's another mistake we see is the rigidity of not being able to accept the one size fits all will not fit everybody's business.
That's I love that point, but I wanted to go back to what you were talking
Yeah,
about before with the brokerages. It's so interesting to me because when I was head of innovation for my previous firm, it was very important for our decision makers to know that, hey, what are the other companies that we know using your product? Because if
sure.
they are, then we're more tempted to use it. So I
Yeah.
find it interesting that the top-down approach doesn't work in the brokerage space.
It doesn't, it can work if the broker has a champion, but at the
Yeah,
franchise level, I think, there's a lot of dynamics in terms of the relationships that exist between agent to broker, broker to franchise, independent to franchise. Those different nuances ultimately, lead to who expects who to serve them up the technology, whether it's to pay for it, to supply it, to negotiate it, to train them on it. And that is not one size fits all. So I think that's what technology companies have to be ready for is you can get buy-in at an enterprise level. It doesn't necessarily mean they can champion it down to make sure that that technology gets used on every transaction.
right.
And so that's where that iteration has to, but the peer-to-peer, the competitive nature of the space, absolutely. Everybody wants to know what everybody's using.
Yeah, yeah. I guess you're saying that it's got to be more customizable for all the different brokerages and that are out
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, exactly. And every broker, different team structures, different team sizes, how a broker is going to train a brokerage of 2000 versus a brokerage of 20, how they're going to train their agents and drive that adoption is going to vary dramatically. So that's some of the, I guess, iteration that has to occur, some of the customization that has to occur.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And what I also love is you've been really the person like involved in expanding the program that you're part of into markets like Australia, Israel, Latin America, Dubai. So like what do these founders are that are building in those markets taught you about problems that US real estate hadn't solved yet?
Well, the founders from our global programs are perpetually curious. I think a lot of it is the markets, maybe the home market that they came from. That's not the ultimate TAM that they're seeking. So they are perpetually curious for those adjacent markets, for markets on the other side of the world, to really understand what's going on in each of those markets so that they can very rapidly pivot and be ready for that scale. Whereas startups that start in the US, that's usually a sizable enough market that they, map their exit from that market alone. So that's one big difference just in terms of how the founders operate in terms of, their path to scale. Some of the challenges that we see being solved for outside of the US market, some that intrigue me, would be climate. I think that there's a stronger adoption, certainly out of our UK program. They have a very deep portfolio in different climate related and energy solutions, which they've seen pretty good adoption with. Another one, which is I find fascinating, is co-living. Not very accepted or welcomed in the U.S. market, but quite popular in other markets. And I think it could be a really great opportunity to close the gap in affordable housing. But it's not welcomed in the U.S. the same way I would say it's welcomed in relatively every other real estate market around the world. But we have some great co-living solutions in our global portfolio, there are some great solutions, stateside, of course. Pad Split, they're not in our portfolio, but that team is phenomenal, and the way they support short to midterm, rentals. I just think it's something I hope the U.S. market can warm up to a bit more.
I mean, affordable housing is becoming such a big market. I don't see how you can just not put more technology into that space. So
Yeah.
hopefully people start recognizing that and start building and creating products for that level. I asked this to your colleague Bob Gillespie when he was back on our podcast, but I want to ask you this. A lot of economists say that the first trillionaire will be a founder of a climate tech solution. Is that something that you believe in?
think it's entirely possible. It's a difficult area to invest in for residential real estate for my sector, uh, and often makes a lot more sense for our commercial program. But home resiliency, property resiliency is really, really important. I'm almost obsessed with it when it comes to my property, but changing weather patterns and everything we've seen just in the last 5 years alone. I think property resiliency is a really hot category. Just no silver bullet, no single solution for it. But yeah, I do entirely think it's possible, the first trillionaire. And I think that's a really great category of technology or category of innovation to see somebody become a trillionaire, because I think we all benefit from that.
Yeah,
Hopefully.
totally. And I want to, you're bringing up like such a good point because like this is something I've talked about with other people who are actually doing a lot of investments, focusing on what you're talking about with property
Yeah,
resiliency. Their whole thesis is, hey, what's going on in the Northeast and the Southeast? These homes are not going to be insurable.
sure.
So their whole focus is let's build in the Midwest because that's where the most resiliency is. So do you expect that kind of shift happening eventually? Like,
I think I see the shift more to geographically centric solutions to equip homes for insurability in their given market. But that is more a more customized approach than using the same substrates across all geographies. Or it's a combination of some of the same substrates, make sense at construction, but there's a level of hardiness to add, to equip that property, whether it is fire prevention or water or other things that I think do make sense. But yeah, certain geographies are going to be more preferential from an investment perspective if they are already on a more sustainable path. But I do think that those other markets can catch up. We just need technology to find those better substrates, or whatever it is that we can outfit a house with. Every day I see a new way, whether it's again fire prevention, flood, earthquake, all kinds of new ideas for. We can't take every home, strip it down, build it from the ground up, but we can still equip it outside in, if that makes sense.
that definitely makes sense, and I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens in the next like 5 to 10 years on that front. I want to go back to the real estate brokerage side. You were talking about the top-down approach or the bottom-up approach, but it seems to me that a lot of these brokerage do hold the leverage. They have to bless the technology, have their employees train on it, and then decide if their agents are even going to touch the tech. So what
Sure.
is the real reason most prop tech dies after the demo?
I think it's because they do the demo and then they set it and forget it. And you have to have a champion. It's, of course, you need the broker to bless it,
Yeah.
but don't expect the person who blessed it to necessarily take on the role of the champion. They may, but super important to find that champion in the organization, the person who's going to be an early adopter, who's going to use it frequently. They're going to give feedback. They're going to help that broker fail fast in some cases where it's not working, and you can go back to that solution provider and say, here's what's not working, can you give us some tips to make it work better? But that champion's also going to advocate to the other agents, here's how it's improving my business, here's how it's making me more efficient, here's how it's getting me more deals. And you really need that, but that takes work, right? Like that takes finding that relationship, finding that person or person, it could be multiple champions. But that's an additional step beyond. It's much easier to come in and do a 30-minute webinar and say, everybody's trained up, everybody go use it, and just expect the
Yeah.
results. But that can be tempting because, in this business, especially in the market cycle we've been in, everybody's off to the next deal and they're off to the next deal. And so it's just really tempting to just train, move on. But taking a beat to find the champions, find the early adopters, stick with them, take that feedback again so you can fail fast, because failure is going to happen. The faster you can get to it, the faster you can get to the learnings that are going to get you to an even bigger deal.
I find it so interesting that you could have the best tech in the land, but at the end of the day, all that matters, not all that matters, but a good part of the success has to do with change management. And as you said,
Yes.
having a champion to be there and help them through the struggle of learning this new technology that may prove a huge ROI once they get the hang of things.
Yeah. Yeah. But you know, it's, I think we're all, as consumers too, we kind of look to champions in our life for different technology that we're a little averse to. We want to see somebody else test it
Yeah.
first. We want to see somebody else use it well, and then it's you know, less scary, less aversion to go, all right, I'll give that a try too. Especially in this age of AI where everything feels really daunting. I myself find myself going, well, how is that industry using it? How is that industry using it? How is that colleague using it? Because I'm not convinced that I'm using it perfectly.
I mean, I'm like personally, I feel overwhelmed sometimes with all the new
Yeah,
updates, all what everyone's talking
yeah,
about. You know, like a few months ago, people were talking about N8N. Now they're saying that's dead. Now, like, focus on Claude
yeah,
code, like it's crazy how
yeah,
fast everything's going. And what's funny, and I hope you can agree with me on this, is I went to a conference just 4 months ago, and what was being discussed then to what is being discussed now,
yeah.
it's it's unbelievable the amount of the speed of how things are getting built so fast.
It is a pretty incredible speed. I really feel for the event producers whose job it is to find the
Yeah.
speakers because the theme is changing, the topic du jour is changing on a daily basis. But yeah, it's really hard to keep up. Um, you know, the unfortunate thing about that is it is hard to keep up, but it I hope we don't push the envelope so far that everybody is drowning and they just give up. And I think that's what's like a little bit disheartening about AI right now is getting overwhelmed and just giving up. And I think that there's a happy medium of you don't have to read every article, you don't have to read every headline. Use what you're using, get comfortable with it, you know, move up to the next level. But I even find myself having to go, don't go down that rabbit hole, don't go down that rabbit hole.
You're right. And I think it's very hard to kind of figure out what certain things that you need to read about or learn about,
Yeah,
which one's going to be helpful for you and which one's not. I think that
right.
is probably the most difficult part for me in this journey.
Yeah, I think it's great that it's aspirational to, you know, hear how talented people in other industries are using it. That doesn't necessarily make it relatable or applicable to real estate. So I have to constantly remind myself of that is the applicability really does vary greatly.
Yeah, which one I wanted to talk about this because someone who I listen to and I have great respect for, Kara Swisher, she's been talking about robotics
Mhm.
long time. She's a big proponent of it. She said that 2026 is the year of robotics. So I would love to know, what are you seeing in the commercial and multifamily space where robotics is going to have a place and kind of be able to adopt in a way where they're not necessarily taking a lot of human roles, but they're making things more efficient and making things better for people who are operating
Yeah.
properties right now.
Yeah, in construction, we see a ton of potential for, you know, modular and prefab, especially because we have such a supply gap to close. That is the hope. I think the challenge is it's still a very capital intensive area of technology. But I think that would be the biggest and best outcome is to close the gap on supply. In the multifamily area, I think the opportunity in robotics, or one of multiple opportunities, is safety and hazardous
Yeah.
conditions. Yes, there's fear about you know, technology taking humans' jobs, but there's some jobs that are really scary, that are really hazardous to perform. That's a great opportunity for robotics to step in, whether that's, you know, some kind of you know, job site surveying, or one of the companies in our portfolio, I think you've chatted with before, RoboShoot. It's a robot to help clean and maintain trash chutes, which are otherwise a hazardous and typically unsanitary, you know, area of a building to maintain. So, I think that these are okay evolutions in terms of it really does allow the human then to be involved in other parts of job site development or make property maintenance and management. But let's take the hazardous opportunities and give them to the
Yeah.
robots in my head.
Yeah, and I'm sure insurance companies will be all for it, and
Yes,
you're going to be able to save on expenses, and that's a
sure,
major part of wanting to adopt technology is if the expenses are getting lower, then why not?
sure, exactly.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting to see what happens there, because I've been, I watched like a 60 Minutes program about how they're using robotics in making cars and how
Hmm.
it's going to basically change the way that these factories are going to be operated. Like, why can it not be the same case in construction and real estate?
Sure. Yeah, and with a level of investment in different substrates, that's different manufacturing processes for different materials going into housing, even more opportunities to create efficiencies in those manufacturing processes. So a lot of opportunity. I think 2026 will be a big year, but I also think it's many, many years out before we see a sizable impact just because of the sheer capital intensive nature of robotics.
Yeah, that's definitely fair to say. AI has really shifted the fear in the brokerage world from falling behind to not knowing what is real. I mean, I go on social media all
Yeah.
the time. I'm always wondering, is this AI or is this actually
Yeah.
real? So, what do you think that means on how brokerages are going to evaluate technology today? And where do you see the need for policy to catch up before it gets worse?
Yeah. It is a challenge because as consumers, we're all experiencing, the confusion, the apprehension of is this real, whether it's this news source or it's social media or it's music. Is this music? Is this actually the singer
Yeah.
that I thought it was who created this? It's fascinating to see the different ways that AI can be used. And some of them nefariously, unfortunately. So I think that initial consumer apprehension, I think hopefully we get past this. It feels like a bubble almost that we're in of that apprehension, where you just don't trust anything. And I'm hopeful that we can kind of get on the other side of that. But brokers are already really good at communicating with consumers. So I actually feel like this is a challenge that they can face easily because they are already in the role of playing that trusted advisor. They are already engaging with consumers in transactions that are emotional, that have high financial value, that do require a really, really heightened level of trust. And so I think that brokers and agents are the most equipped to get them past maybe this apprehension in terms of what is real out there. From a policy perspective, where we sit in the industry, working, with innovation firms, I think where we need to see policy catch up is allow it to be built so that protections are built where they make sense without constraining innovation. That's just really challenging to do because often policy is either so widespread it almost feels impossible to do anything with, or it's incredibly restrictive and it's incredibly narrow, and that can limit then usage of great technology. And so I think we want to just try to find that right balance there. And sometimes that's adoption, of the policy and consistency in the policy. Photo disclosures is a great example. California has taken a lead, CAAB 723. And there will be multiple states to follow. The good news is a lot of real estate industry stakeholders, specifically the MLS framework, a lot have already proactively gotten ahead of this regulation that's coming, and so they're already adopting processes for photo disclosures. I think the challenge is how the processes are built and then communicated to the consumer. I'll just pick on one little example when it comes to photo disclosures. The term AI altered, that can be received differently. AI altered can be a very positive thing for a really busy family. that doesn't have time to maybe declutter their space before those photos are taken. Well, AI can come in and remove the toaster and the kids' toys and the dog's toys and get everything out of there to really elevate that listing to allow them to, sell that property efficiently. But the term AI altered could also be applied to a property where the structural integrity was compromised by a wall being moved or an electrical socket. So I think we have to make sure that between the vendors, and then those using those AI editing tools, we have really clear, we're being really clear about what that language means. And when something is, a positive, we want to celebrate that and see a lot of usage of that, while maintaining the policy that kind of weeds out those nefarious cases that are not in the best interests of consumers.
Yeah, and I kind of pertain it to like the dating apps, right? Like you don't want to be catfished by someone.
Right,
So, yeah.
right.
Like why would you want to be catfished for a property?
Exactly. I think that the good news, again, just like brokers and agents are already really good at communicating with consumers, they already uphold a higher level of trust, with consumers simply by way of that code of ethics. They are already motivated to make sure that property visualization focuses on image authenticity and perpetuates trust and not the opposite of it. So I think that's really hopeful, where I don't know if all industries necessarily have those kind of existing, maybe it's not, membership virtues, but I don't know if they have those kind of existing communities in place where they might be, more recipients of policy rather than partners in the process.
Yeah, I think the policymakers are definitely going to have their hands full.
Yeah.
This it'll be definitely interesting to see what happens there. You can see 5 years out based on the cohorts you're evaluating right now. So, without giving away the new class, what themes keep surfacing that tell you where residential real estate is actually heading?
Yeah, there's a few that have been, pretty common over the last few cycles, and I expect them over the next couple of cycles because we typically do annual cohorts. Um, the first is the digitization of the transaction. That has been kind of ongoing. We were, early supporters of e-signature and remote online notarization. The pace has really picked up though, which is extremely exciting, right? Something that is,
Yeah.
a very analog and archaic process, digitizing it a lot faster, using machine learning to take fragmented data sources and stitch them together, make, different flows, in the transaction more seamless, to talk to each other, to work with each other. I think obviously the better the infrastructure gets, then the better the output. So the stronger the infrastructure that's supporting brokers, lenders, title, everybody involved in the transaction, the stronger their infrastructure, the better the outcome, the better the output for the consumer at the end of the day. I hope that the consumer has an appreciation for that, since so much of that does happen,
Yeah.
behind the scenes. But I think that the digitization is going to be a really important theme now and well into the future, 5+ years from now. Another area that, we're looking into deeply, have supported, is financial solutions, lending, anything that gets an aspiring homeowner or a first-time home buyer ready. So whether that's savings tools, whether that could be, rewards programs for renters, anything that can equip aspiring homeowners to get there faster, I think is a really positive thing, especially with all the, stats lately on the rising age of a first-time home buyer. And so that's a category. A company in our program last year, Foyer, which operates, similar to likened to a 401k for a first-time home buyer. I think that's really exciting it's not a tool to get people into homeownership overnight, but I think to get them into that journey is really exciting, to get them excited about that path to homeownership, where it can otherwise feel really daunting, really far off, really, deflating. So really excited about that. And then, we kind of talked about it earlier, with home resiliency, but livability, how we live in our properties. So that could be resiliency, and where we choose to live based on geography, is that reflective of a lack of insurability, a lack of home resiliency in a given geography. But another underlying theme in livability would be aging in place. Significant portion of the boomer generation, especially the younger boomers, have a strong interest to age in place, but not all properties are really built to support aging in place. So I think we want to stay on the very, very early edge, cutting edge of those trends, and then equip realtors, obviously, with the best knowledge, the best education, the best technology for, stronger livability, especially if the average tenure of a transaction, 10 years. 10 years is a really long time to go before selling and buying a new home. That's a lot of time in a property to, maintain it, to enjoy living in it. And so we also want to see the technology that supports allowing homeowners to live the way they want to live.
Like really, you like preach. I think all the different topics that you just brought up is something that I always think about all the time, especially the digitization of like the closing process.
Yes.
It's so archaic.
So
And
archaic.
I was just talking to a GP like yesterday, and he was doing a closing in Atlanta, and he's
Yes.
like on, freaking out about getting it all done, and he was there till like 6, 7 o'clock at night. I mean, there's got to be a better way.
There is. We're working on it. Yeah,
Yeah.
we bought a house last year, and I was shocked to find myself, at the closing table with a giant stack of papers. But it just gave me motivation to go and, to find a better way.
Can you believe in this world of AI, there's like you're getting like a stack of
Yeah,
papers to your
yeah. It was surprising, but motivating.
Yeah, I love that. You seem to operate a pretty intense pace professionally. So what do you do to recharge? And are you genuinely passionate about outside of work?
Yeah, well, you brought up, one earlier, pizza. I love food,
Yeah.
foodie at heart. I love cooking too. I don't claim to be any good at it, but because I love food, it's fun to cook. But around Chicago, always game for the newest restaurant. I think we have one of the best food cities, in the nation. No diss to any other great food cities, but we have an incredible diversity of cuisine, really talented chefs. So great sports teams, great museums, but you could spend an entire weekend just eating your way through Chicago because the food is so good. I think that probably kind of goes like part and parcel with being passionate about travel. I like to get out from behind my screen. I just want to, explore with every spare moment of time that I can. So hoping to get, we haven't booked anything yet, but hoping to, book something fun overseas. We were recently in San Miguel de Allende for a friend's destination wedding, and that was a really charming little city. It's actually, I think, a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And that was a completely different area of Mexico I hadn't seen before in the mountains north of Mexico City. And that was just love to find, not a hole in the wall. It's certainly discovered people go there all the time. But it was new to me. So that's what keeps me, I guess, busy outside of these work hours.
Yeah, I mean, summer's coming up, so
Yeah.
definitely figure out my summer plans as well. Definitely want to go on a few trips. So I definitely hear you there. One last question for the realtor right now who's listening and feels overwhelmed by how fast technology is moving, which is one thing you would tell them to focus on in the next 12 months?
Yeah, it's going to be different for everybody. This is the worst answer in the world. It depends. But I
A
would
lot of
say,
lawyers say that.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I would say every realtor should look at their business and go, what causes me the most pain? What is the biggest obstacle? What is that thing that I spend the most amount of time on that holds me back from working with my clients or finding new clients or doing the parts of the business that I love? What is just causing me that biggest burden? And then go solve for that because it is very distracting. They're going to get marketed all day, every day by fancy new solutions for everything. Yes, over time, we hope that they will find a technological advancement for every part of their business. But, take it one technology at a time, but solve for that biggest pain point. Or try to. Do you watch The Office by
I
chance?
do. One of my favorite
Yeah.
shows. Yeah.
So there's an episode in there where Michael he gets his foot in the flat iron, the George Foreman, and then he goes to the hospital with Dwight and he says to the doctor, "What's more important, a head injury or a foot injury?" And the doctor very obviously says, "A head injury." So solve for the head injury, right? Like focus
Yeah.
on the biggest point of pain and then move on to the foot and then move on to those other areas of the business that you can improve. But start with the big stuff.
That's some great advice. Yeah, I could talk to you for hours. I like everything you've said has been so fascinating. So thank you so much for being
Of course.
here. It was really enjoyable. And for our listeners out there, how can they reach you? Please share your information.
Yeah, I'll give them my email of Ashley at narreach.com. So whether you're a realtor and you just want some guidance on what technology to use, or you're a startup and you want to be part of Reach, and then you can find us at all the conferences throughout the year. So join us at a conference. Come tell us what you're working on, and of course our website narreach.com to learn more about our portfolio and our process. And I know, Ryan, I'll get to see you soon, hopefully sooner than Blueprint. But I know we'll all
Yeah.
be there as well.
Yeah, yeah, definitely looking forward to it. Thank you again.
Of course. Thank you.
Uh, be sure to stay tuned for my takeaway after this word from our sponsor. Hey there, CRE Unplugged fam. We would like to give a huge shout out to our sponsor, the Game Changers over at Hilo, the customer experience platform for buildings that's turning heads in the real estate world.
That's right. Can we talk about how Hilo is transforming the way we manage properties and create unforgettable experiences? Ryan, what's the first thing that comes to your mind when you think about Hilo?
Well, Nadine, it's all about reducing friction in property management. Hilo is like the magic wand that makes everything seamless and efficient. Say goodbye to those time-consuming tasks and hello to streamlined operations and communications.
Efficiency is crucial, but what about personalized experiences? Hilo takes it to the next level with a vision to tailor each interaction to the needs and preferences of its customers.
And let's not forget the community aspect. Hilo builds vibrant, connected communities. It's fostering a sense of belonging and togetherness.
Now, here's something that truly sets Hilo apart: their commitment to advancing ESG initiatives. They're not just about buildings, they're about making a positive impact on the environment. That's a win-win for everyone.
So, to our listeners out there, if you're ready to elevate your properties, digitize and enhance customer experience, and maximize satisfaction, Hilo is the answer. Please visit hiloapp.com for more information. That's hiloapp.com. I have had a lot of guests on this show, but not so many who sit where Ashley sits. She sees the earliest stage technology before it hits the market. She watches how brokerages actually behave when a new tool lands in front of them, and she has gotten a global view of what is being built in markets that most people in the US real estate are not paying attention to yet. Ashley was direct about something that a lot of founders do not want to hear. Brokerages have a strong appetite for technology, but they are not looking for a product that was built for everyone. They want something that feels like it was built for them. The founders winning are the ones who came in having done their homework, understood the specific pain points of that brokerage, and showed up with a solution that fit the level of customization it wants, that moves a conversation from interesting to let us talk about the next steps. We also talked about the digitization of real estate transactions. And this is an area where there's been a long overdue for a real overhaul. If you ever closed on a home or a commercial property, you know exactly what I mean. It is slow, paper heavy, fragmented, process that involves too many parties, too many steps, and too much room for things to go wrong. The technology exists to make this better, and the operators and brokerages that embrace it are going to have a real advantage over the ones that are still doing it the old way. But the opportunity does not stop at the closing table. The average homeowner lives in their home for about 10 years, and the technology being built right now around how people experience, maintain, and improve their homes over that entire journey is going to define what livability actually looks like for the next generation. The companies that are thinking beyond the transaction and about the full decade of living are the ones building something that will genuinely last. And robotics is a big part of that story too. Taking humans out of the dangerous jobs on a construction site lowers insurance premiums for contractors, reduce costs for operators, property owners, and creates a safer industry overall. That is a financial argument and a human one. I think it moves faster than most people in this space expect. And the last thing I want to leave you with is something that just applies as much to commercial real estate as it does to residential. Ashley talked about how the broker is the champion that helps agents learn, adopt, and actually get value out of new technology. We see the exact same dynamic of the commercial side. You need someone inside the organization who believes in the tool, trains on it, and brings others along. Without that person, it does not matter how good your product is. Ashley is that outside of all of this. She is someone who genuinely loves to travel and experience new cultures through food, and that curiosity about the world is exactly what makes her perspective on global PropTech trends so authentic. Find your champion, invest in them, and the results will follow. That is why conversations like this matter. Well, that's all the time we have today. Thank you again to Ashley Stinton. Please subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. If you have any questions that you want us to answer on air, you can email us at info@creunplugged.com or reach us via our website, creunplugged.com. See you next time, and keep your conversations real and unplugged.